Welcome to the topic number 4, Unit 1 review on the scientific method. The materials that we're covering in this answer key can be reviewed in greater depth by referring to daysheets number 9 through 12. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. For the first section of topic number 4, all we're doing is reviewing key vocabulary to understand the scientific method. Remember, we've talked about this before. Biology is not only a science class, but it's also a foreign language. So if you don't know what your individual definitions mean, you'll have a hard time being successful on the test. Let's look at number 1. Number 1 is asking, what is the independent variable? This is also known as the IV. Remember, independent variable starts with the letter I, which means it's what I change. And then I need to ask myself, if I'm doing an experiment, who am I? I am going to be a scientist. So the best answer that aligns with number 1 should be G. What the scientist manipulates, and remember this word manipulates means the same thing as changes in an experiment. So number 1 should be G, and I can cross that off because I know I've already used it. For our next one, number 2 is asking, what is a hypothesis? Remember, the hypothesis is the second step of the scientific method. A lot of people are forgetting that. Not only is it the second step of the scientific method, but it also is a key vocab term, and it actually means the same thing as an inference. So I'm going to write that here as well. So if you know that an inference is an educated guess, then you know what a hypothesis is because they have the same definition. And if we look across here, we'll notice that it lines up with answer choice B. And again, I'm going to cross it off so I know that I've already used it. For number 3 is asking, what is a dependent variable? A dependent variable is also known as a DV, and I want you to be comfortable with either way that you might see that on your test. A dependent variable does depend on the independent variable, but we've talked about whether or not that's a very good definition. Remember, the dependent variable is what we're actually collecting in an experiment, or we can say it's what's being measured or the output or the effect. Any of those things would work. So if I look over here on the side, I want to see what measures up to that particular or those particular definitions. So if I look here, A, it says the effect the scientist measures in an experiment. Again, if our IV is the cause, our DV is the effect, and it's what's being measured in the experiment. That's the key. We can also think of it as an outcome. So go ahead and highlight that on your paper because you don't know which way you're going to see it on your test. So number 3 should be A. I'm going to cross that off because I know that'll help me know that I already used it. Number 4 is asking, what are constants? Constants are things that stay the same throughout an entire experiment, and they stay the same for both the control group and the experimental group, because remember, in a good experiment, we only ever change one thing, and the one thing that we're changing is the IV. So everything outside of the IV is going to be known as a constant, or things that are absolutely 100% the same. So let's go ahead and see if we can find it. It looks like E, things that stay the same throughout an experiment. Looks like it should be the right answer, so number 4 should be E, and I'm going to cross it out so that I know that I already used that answer choice. Let's look at 5. 5 is asking, what is a controlled experiment? Now, a controlled experiment is an experiment that has all the parts of a good experiment. So I'm going to write that, all the parts of a good, and then we know that good also means the same thing as valid experiment. So let's see which one of those makes sense for us. So an explanation sorted by lots of evidence doesn't sound right. A fair test of a scientific question, or the process scientists use to solve a problem. Well, F looks like the best thing for me because we're looking for a fair test, and our test is our experiment, so it's a type of experiment used to solve a scientific question. So we're going to go ahead and put F for number 5 and put an X through it so we know that we've already used it. Number 6 is asking, what is a theory? Now, a theory is something that can only be decided upon once lots of different experiments have been done and lots of scientists all get the same information. They can agree that this is what they will see every single time they do this particular experimentation. So it's an explanation that's supported by lots and lots and lots of evidence. So the best answer choice for 6 should be D. An explanation supported by lots of evidence goes with theory. And I'm going to cross it off, and that leaves us with one thing, but let's go ahead and look at it anyway. For number 7 is asking, what is the scientific method? And we know that the scientific method is a process. Specifically, it's a 5-step process that we're going to know for our class. So 5 steps that scientists use to solve a problem. So number 7 should be C. Well, that takes care of our key vocab. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the next section of our scientific method review. For number 8, you're going to have a number of different questions that look like this on your actual assessment. You'll have to read an entire experiment and assess whether or not the experiment is any good. So let's go ahead and read through. It says, Daquan wants to buy his mother perfume for her birthday. He doesn't know which type of perfume his mother would like best. He decides to go to the store and get some free samples. The first sample was Mom's current perfume. Well, current is the normal. So I'm already thinking that this is my control group because this is the thing that I don't change. So I'm going to go ahead and label that just for my brain. The second sample was a new fragrance. Anytime you see the word new, you should automatically think this is the experimental group, called Beautiful Roses, that he saw in a TV commercial. So I'm going to go ahead and label this experimental group. I'm going to continue to read. The last sample was Full Moon Passion. Again, this has to be my experimental group because it's not what his mom normally uses. He asked 10 women at his church which perfume they like best. So now we need to ask ourselves, is this a good experiment? And above good, I'm going to write the word valid because I want you to be comfortable with both terms. So we need to ask ourselves, does this experiment have all the components that are key for a good experiment? So we need to ask ourselves, is there or are there all the groups that are necessary in order for the experiment to be good, meaning the control and experimental. And I see that there is a control and 2 experimental groups, so that works for me. The next thing that I want to know are there any constants? And if I look through, I notice that he asked the same 10 women about all 3 perfumes. All 3 perfumes are free samples. So these are all things that are held the same outside of the type of perfume that we're changing. And obviously the type of perfume that we're changing is going to be my IV, so my IV is easily identifiable. So I'm going to go ahead and say that yes, this is a good experiment. Now on your test, you're only going to have to explain why it's a bad experiment, or you're only going to have to do this why portion if it doesn't meet all the components of a good experiment. So we can go ahead and leave this blank for now. Let's jump down and look at number 9. For number 9, it's saying that a student investigates if listening to classical music, so this is what I am doing, so I am changing this, so this is my IV, can improve your memory. So improving your memory is what you are going to be measuring, how good your memory is. So that's my DV. So these are the types of things you're going to have to do on your test. You're simply going to have to sort where the IV is versus the DV. So my IV is going to be classical music, or you can say listening to classical music. And then my DV obviously is going to be memory because this is what we're measuring or testing. Looking at number 10, we're asking you to sort the following steps of the scientific method in order by placing a 1 through 5 next to each step. So my very first step, in order to start the scientific method, I need to know what it is that I'm trying to solve. So the very first thing I have to do is state the problem. State the problem is also known as sometimes an observation. So if you see that on your test, it means the same thing. After I make an observation or state the problem, the next thing that I need to do is make a hypothesis. So making a hypothesis is number 2. After I make a hypothesis, I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction and see how that, or make a prediction to determine how that hypothesis is going to play out. So making a prediction is step 3. After I make my prediction, I'm ready to go ahead and start my experiment. So my controlled experiment is number 4. And notice that it says controlled experiment. That means that we have a control group, an experimental group, an IV, and a DV. All the components of a valid experiment. And then once I do my controlled experiment, I'll have data, and then I can sort through that data to determine what my actual conclusion is, which would be step 5, drawing a conclusion. For number 11, we simply have to fill in the blank. A good experiment should have blank independent variable or variables. And we've talked about this a million times. In a good experiment, we can only ever change one thing. That's very important. If we change more than one thing, we can't attribute the change to any one specific thing. So we don't know what actually caused the change in the end. All right. Now we're ready to look at questions 13 through 17, but in order to do that, we actually have to read over the experiment. So let's read over the experiment. It says Superman and Batman are arguing about which muscle cream makes them look stronger in their spandex outfits. And I've told you this before that your IV and your DV usually can be found in the first sentence. So what am I changing if I were doing this experiment? I'm changing the muscle cream. So the muscle cream is going to be my IV. And what am I measuring? I'm measuring strength, so that's going to be my DV. They decide to conduct an experiment to find out. So for 1 month, they give 50 men, ages 18 through 25, Superman cream. 50 other men of the same age are going to get Batman cream. And then 50 other men of the same age get no cream at all. And this no cream at all, whoops, typo, no cream at all is what we would normally use. So this is already something that I can identify as my control group. After 1 month, they measure each man's increase in muscle mass to see who was right. So number 12 is asking, what is my independent variable or my IV? And I've already found it. I know it's my muscle cream. Number 13 is asking, what is my dependent variable? Again, I've already identified that, so this is going to be strength. 14 is asking what is or are the experimental groups. And remember, the experimental groups are receiving the muscle cream. So I'm going to go back up and look, and I see one group is getting Superman cream, so 50 men with Superman cream. And I'm going to read on. 50 other men of the same age get the Batman cream. So the 50 men with Batman cream. Those are my two experimental groups. Next, it's asking, what is my control group? And my control group, I've already identified, it's the group of men, 50 men, who do not get any cream at all because that's the normal. So it's going to be 50 men without muscle cream. And then for my last one, number 16, it says to list at least 3 constants from the experiment. So I'm going to go up, and remember, my constants are things that are the same for the entire experiment. So I know that I'm using 50 men. That's going to be a constant. It's true for all of my groups. All of my men are ages 18 through 25. So ages 18 through 25 is another constant. And if I look, how long are we going to let the experiment last for all 3 groups? And I notice here it says 1 month. So the time, or we can say 1 month, could be our final constant. All right, so there are our answers for topic number 4. Remember, if you have any additional questions or you need to go into more detail to refresh your memory, you're welcome to look at day sheets 9 through 12, or you can go back to BioMonster Cinema, and if you scroll down on BioMonster Cinema, you'll see Introduction to the Scientific Method. This video goes into great detail about your IV, your DV, your control group, your experimental group, and all the other vocab that's necessary for you to truly understand the scientific method. All right, good luck, guys, with your studying.